Hello and welcome. We begin today with an important question. How important is a name? And then we could ask, how important is it to choose a name properly? When I was first told about this product, its name and importance wasn't wasted on me. It was actually more than perfect. It made me smile once the meaning had fully sunk in. You see, Virpil space grips use Greek letters for their names. First was delta, which is D and the fourth letter. Delta is widely accepted to describe the difference or change, the quantifiable delta, the delta between things. At the time, it really stood out and represented a new delta within the joystick market. It was also great planning because being the fourth letter meant that Virpil had some room to grow. And there you have a little bit of foreshadowing in my little story. Alpha released quite soon after. It's quite clear that the design was completely unshackled. I did think at the time that Virpil had chosen to waste the extra letters, past gamma and past beta directly to alpha. As I began to explore for that review, I started to use them, and alpha grips more than deserved that letter. It did make sense, and then sadly it was also when I realized that I would probably never play with my beloved deltas again. They would be retired to sit on a shelf for the rest of their days as part of a display. The switch from Delta to Alpha carried over with a great set of new features and brought with it some familiar ones that were missing. Alpha added a flip double triple stage trigger with an analog brake lever, the analog mini thumbsticks, and the mouse style scroll wheel. Alpha incorporated a 5-way thumb switch, 2 more 5-ways, and a 3-way. I said unshackled because it was the first real effort to sprinkle more bindings anywhere that it would make sense that are within your reach. My video titled Alpha is currently my second most watched video ever. Alpha is the first, Alpha is the strongest, Alpha is most senior. How could we describe more evolution on something that's already the Alpha? Some common words emphasize improvement such as plus, premium, or custom. Those don't work as well as prime. Prime is primary, principal, and dominant. Alpha Prime would be the name, and hopefully, with all of that hype, the product lives up to its name. Alpha Prime can really be broken down into a 3-part update over the standard Alpha with the following notable changes and upgrades. First, I found that every switch, every hat, and every lever on the Prime are somehow upgraded or work better. The shape of the hats and mini sticks are better, the buttons are slightly but noticeably more tactile, there are improvements in the grip design. The presses click with a tactile response and sound better in this new choice of grip material, but a little bit more on that later. The clicks feel just a little bit more clicky than my standard Alpha grips, and I don't believe it's just because they're older and more broken in. Starting with the trigger on the Prime, the main trigger is more than a slight improvement, great as it's normally the most used and most important binding. I normally don't find very much value in doing any kind of AMSR type testing, but it's totally applicable and it's meant to illustrate the changes. I have what I think is a unique opportunity to compare 3 generations of Alpha grip for you. So you likely heard a nicer sounding trigger pull. It's clearly there, and it's more than the sound though, as the initial pull feels much lighter than the later run of the standard Alphas. I quickly adapted, and I very much like this tuning. Its clicky feedback is great, and I appreciate its more muted sound. The second stage click at the very end of Alpha Prime's main trigger is also sharper and a little bit more satisfying to use. This updated trigger version is more premium overall, requiring a little bit more force than before. The 2 stages are very nicely spaced, and for reference, the Alpha Prime still requires half as much force to initiate than my reference Warthog grip. The second is to offer this new grip as a fully blacked out edition, something normally reserved for only the best. Single momentary red switch has been replaced with a black momentary. You can visually tell them apart just by looking. And on the subject of changes, you may have noticed that the 5-way pyramid hat was substituted for a 5-way castle hat. The other 5-ways also got updated with a new shape, and the new shape of the mini thumbstick is fantastic to use. Third, which is of course the big one, Prime replaces the majority of the plastic body for metal, and metal, as it turns out, is a lot more than just looks. In the past, I never had concerns about the rigidity of the Alpha. They're solid, but they are not as solid as the Prime. You only notice it when you do a point-to-point comparison. It's not psychological because the metal grips must be able to hold onto the twist mechanism better, resulting in that improved rigidity. The new grip incorporates some other small tweaks, and I want to discuss weight. Humans will tend to quantify quality by weight. Whenever people come over and I give them a random set of grips on the table, they always immediately choose Warthog grip as the best, without even looking at it. They are sure it must be the best as soon as they touch it because they say, wow. And I ask why, and they always say, it feels heavy. It's a full 1,034 grams or 2 pounds 4 ounces of pressure cast powdered Zamac, which is a mixture of zinc and aluminum. Very heavy grips attached to a joystick gimbal from an engineering perspective add to mechanical drawback, and any feeling of quality is gone once the weight is attached to the base. Most of the mass is no longer apparent to the user. I'll explain. It becomes progressively harder to recenter a very heavy grip due to the gravity acting on it further off-center. Many of you are going to feel like I'm nitpicking, and for many, mass won't manifest much as a problem because many people actually prefer a very strong progressive cam and a stiff spring. For planes, strong and stiffer is more faithful to reality. For space sim pilots, however, many have favored a more light linear feeling cam combined with a lighter spring. This is why the Space or Cosmo style cam was designed to minimize the feeling of a center bump. It works extremely well with light springs, providing a snappy, precise feel. How you choose is up to you for personal taste, but there's a point in discussing weight. Heavy is good for first impressions, and once that grip is attached to the gimbal, that extra inertia isn't needed and isn't helping. So, lighter means that you do less work and you can be more precise with your inputs. And in speaking with the teams, they ensured the switch to metal could be done without adding a bunch of extra mass. This is a positive. This is a good thing. So the Alpha Prime being 606 grams is only 100 grams heavier than the standard Alpha. And for comparison, may I remind you, the Warthog grip is a full 1,030 grams. Please comment your comments in the comments if you think I'm wrong and if you think mass doesn't matter. It's always good practice to not launch a new product without addressing the known faults, and I noticed that Virpil addressed some big ones. Some reported that the cover surrounding the mini stick could break loose and fumble around. I was able to recreate this issue, no problem, but I needed to be quite forceful with the mini stick and then it would just happen. When this panel pops off in a dogfight, it's super distracting and super frustrating. On the early runs of alphas, a bit of crazy glue would fix this. I was not able to recreate this situation with my later alpha grips because it was fixed, but this issue led me to test a little bit harsher in the future. Immediately evident in the Prime grip is that this section has been completely dealt with. Upgrades to the Prime also include the mini stick itself with a wider contoured shape and a new choice of rubber texture. A much better feel and easier to be a lot more precise with tiny movements. Easier and more stable when you click down while remaining where you want. There are 2 new screws holding down the momentary pinky button. There are 2 screws on the 5-way modified castle switch that's below your thumb, and overall, this update is more than simply recasting the original grip in a new material. The metal casting has a lot more unique details surrounding the buttons, the seam is clean, and it now runs directly down the center. There are fewer bolts overall that are needed to hold the sections together, and the bolts that protrude into your palm are countersunk, and all of the holes are contoured. The familiar shape, though, is identical down to the 1/10 of a millimeter. The inner grip insert sits fully flush with a metric uniform gap. It's not plastic, but cast in a very hard rubber, providing a bit of palm traction. Even though some might say there is zero functional benefit, Virpil added 5 transparent frosted sections that glow with the programmable lighting. Alpha grip has a smoky plastic accent all around, and the Prime also adds this inlaid to the grip. If you're one of those who just absolutely hates anything that glows in RGB, within a second you can disable that in the software. If, on the other hand, you're one that appreciates a good glow, you're going to be super excited. I'm a sucker for lights and I appreciate these little details. The extra accent looks stunning and your grip function improves with the better rubber texture. It's a little bit cold at first, but it warms up within a minute. The grip shape remains the same with good natural relief that conforms well to your hand. When comparing my original Alpha to Alpha Prime, the torque required to twist is a little bit sharper with a slightly more identifiable center. This change in tuning is quite slight and appreciated. Carried over is the ability to lock out the twist when needed with an included Allen wrench. The locking collar includes 3 lockdown screws. Please try not to misplace that included tool or you'll never get the grip off the gimbal. The Prime retains an adjustable wrist rest and the grip is very chonky. Many comments have come back to me from the community over the years that Alpha is large and is unsuitable for people with smaller hands. Out of the box, I had issues reaching the uppermost buttons as I also have small hands. I was able to address this by using the wrist rest, but even with adjusting that, I know there are some people with small hands who are still unable to achieve a comfortable grip. I want to end out this session by mentioning that the top cover over the smoked accent has a new fancy design on it and it's still plastic, not metal. Perhaps that was done to keep the weight or cost down. It's not really a big issue, but I mention it anyways as part of the review. And no review video would be complete without a rundown of what's available, so here we go. Alpha Trigger is unusual. This is only on the Prime. It's still comprised of 2 metal parts, a flip-down trigger, and a 2-stage trigger. The flip trigger now has 3 bindings, and the main trigger has 2. Binding 1 is active when the flip trigger is up, and it changes when it's flipped down. That's new. Binding 2 is active when you fully pull the flip trigger where it touches the second trigger. There's no tactile or audible click on this microswitch. The only feedback you get is when that metal comes in contact with the other metal and when it bottoms out. The flip trigger can produce only one of its bindings at any given time, meaning flipped up is binding 1 only, flipped down is binding 32 only, and it'll turn off as soon as you pull a little bit. And then binding 2 is only at the point of contact between both metal triggers. Binding 3 and 4 are the 2 stages of the main trigger and they work like any other joystick. Both are tactile, as I said, and you can combine them to work together. So you can pull the flip trigger and initiate binding 2. But if you keep pulling, you initiate 3 and then 4. This way it's possible to stack 2, 3, and 4 into one pull, and 3 and 4 can be used without the flip trigger. Creativity is your ally. You can choose to use them or not. Binding 5 is a push button associated with the analog mini stick. Bind number 6 is momentary opposite to it. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 is the middle 5-way castle switch. 12 is the blacked out momentary. 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 is the 5-way upper castle switch. 18, 19, 20 is the side mounted 3-way. 21 is the mouse wheel push binary. 22 is the mouse wheel deep push binary. 23 and 24 are the mouse wheel binary, and those work like key presses, not like an axis. I use these to modulate zoom and then push to reset, fine-tune mining laser, and other bindings such as speed limit. Aside from the trigger, I'm constantly using the mouse wheel. 25, 6, 7, 8, and 9 is the 5-way thumb. Number 30 is the lower momentary pinky that I use for Discord push to talk, and it's bound on both hands to help with multitasking. 31 is a binary bind at the end of a full pull of the brake lever, which also has an analog axis. And then I already spoke about 32, which is a new trigger bind on the Prime only. You have some analog binds, and these are light and linear. You have an analog brake lever, the super nice X and Y mini stick, and the grip, as I said, incorporates a Z-twist axis. Including the gimbal, you have 12 bindable axes, 6 5-way, 2 3-way, 12 buttons, and 10 trigger stages. This is why we love Alpha. It has excessive bindings, but in a good way. And I've only had one person in 7 years and 87,000 comments tell me that they actually didn't buy Alpha because it had too many bindings. All of the other people were happy. You can simply choose not to bind things, but they're there when you need them. As we come to the end of the video, I'm going to state the obvious. When a product sits in a higher price range, value needs to be weighted by considering the upfront cost against the time you'll invest in using it. Expensive things can still have good value if you use them often or daily. These are very durable products with a long service life, so in this case, you buy once and expect to use it for life without drama. You can go very far with good entry-level gear, but especially to my Star Citizen viewers, please keep this in mind before you tell me that good gear is too expensive. I see too many people out there with tens of thousands of dollars in fake spaceships cheaping out on cheap entry-level hardware. Fleets get melted and adjusted year after year, but your hardware is your only physical interaction with the game. So I ask you, skip the bloody Carrack this year or the Icarus and treat yourself to some great gear. The game will not be finished this year, and proper hardware, unlike a good concept ship, can be used right now and throughout the rest of your gaming. Choose hardware first, then fake ships, because precision isn't only good in dogfighting or racing. Invest in good hardware now, and it'll be with you longer than any ship in your fleet. It's interesting because Virpil seems to have demonstrated a desire to push really high into the ceiling, with a focus on the pure upper end of the market. This style may not appeal to the pure flight sim pilot, but the Prime works perfectly fine in an F-18 or even a 767. Tell us if you think this truly is Alpha Prime, or post what features you might change. This video was a huge undertaking to research, script, and compile. I value feedback, and I invite you to join our Discord if a more detailed conversation is what you want. Please let others know about Alpha Prime by sharing wherever this video would be on topic. Fly safe. Thank you for spending your time with me. See you in the verse.